Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Identity Podcast right here for the Earth Day special. Once again, you are listening and watching the Identity Podcast brought to you by Find Your ID NYC. Don't forget to go ahead and like us on Facebook and all other social media platforms at the Identity Podcast. And of course, you can check out our podcast available on all streaming platforms, including Spotify and Apple. Pretty great stuff. And of course, if you love the Identity Podcast and want to sponsor us, well, guess what? You can. All you have to do is email us at press@findyouridnyc.com. Right there, that link at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get back to you with more details on that matter. So pretty great stuff. Once again, I am one of your co-hosts, Caleb, for the Identity Podcast. Thank you as always for tuning in every single week. Very excited. As you can see, the screen's a little cluttered. We have a lot of people here. We are here for the Earth Day special featuring a whole lot of people, but I'm grateful, and I hope everyone else is as grateful to be able to be here. It's going to be a really fun show, so let's go ahead and dig into it, right? So once again, the Earth Day special right here for the Identity Podcast, episode 37. Crazy to think we've been this far along, but here we are, continuing and moving forward. And of course, for our environmental series, touching on the environment, sustainability, and how to better our Earth and everything. So featuring Lisa Betty, Elizabeth Lindbergh, Leslie Webb, Cassandra Carmelina, and of course, Tom Duncanson, kind of an all-star studded cast, as I like to say. Welcome, everyone. Lisa, how are you? I think you're on mute.
My apologies. I'm definitely on mute.
No worries at all.
It's like the worst thing that happened. That never even has happened in a Zoom meeting yet. In a live podcast. Well, I am well, but getting it together. Can't find the mute button, but I am well. Thank you so much.
Well, you know what? I'm still grateful to have you here, and thank you for being here. And it's okay. Sometimes we all have trouble with the mute button. So, especially I've had trouble with it, and it's my own show. So, but thanks again, Lisa, for coming on. Leslie, how are you today?
Hi, I'm great. Thank you for having me back on the show.
Of course. Thanks for coming back on. It's 2 weeks in a row we got to see each other, and to continue to discover your identity. I honestly, last week's episode was a phenomenal episode, and I know you were a little nervous, but you did so well, and it was a great episode, and I felt inspired, and that always, I think, makes me feel better about everything and about doing the show. When you as a host and when you as a guest can leave the experience and feel good about it. So thank you again, Leslie, for coming on. We're grateful to have you here tonight and talk about some different things with sustainability and writing, such as you do and all that. But as we continue to move on, I feel like I should have like breakout rooms on Zoom, a panel for everyone. But as we continue, Cassandra, how are you today?
Hey, I'm doing well. It's good to be here. Happy Earth Week, everyone.
Happy Earth Week. It's great to have you again, Cassandra, and I'm excited to talk about different sustainable waste and pickup and everything like that tonight. I think it'll be fun, and we'll talk about some of the other things that you're doing as well, which is pretty cool. Elizabeth, welcome back.
Hello.
How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing good. Happy to be here with all these amazing people that are just helping save the planet.
Well, thanks, Elizabeth, for coming on. It means the world to us again. And Tarek and I have started to realize that you may be our number one fan. And you know what? I think that's a great thing to hold. I'm a little biased, but I think that's a great thing to hold. So, thank you for that, Elizabeth. Thanks again for coming back on. I'm excited to talk about all kinds of things and some of the topics that you put in the hat as well. And of course, last but not least, Tom Duncanson. Hello, how are you?
I'm well. Thanks for asking.
Well, thanks again for coming on, Tom. It's great to see you again. It's going from seeing you all the time to not seeing you at all it's a lot different, but it's great to have you back on.
We should we should be asking what you're going to do when you graduate in May.
Oh no, we don't need to ask that.
All right.
That's a big topic, and the show is not about me, right? It's about the Earth.
Well, sometimes it's about you.
Well, that's a great question, though. The focus right now is radio and podcast, which I'm in at the moment, and just kind of going from there. I can tell specifics later, but yeah, that's kind of the big thing. There's some opportunities at hand, and we're just tackling it one day at a time. So
Okay.
that's how it's going for me. Everything's good, and I'm just excited to be here. Again, everyone, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. It's an honor to have you on here, and let's go ahead and get started. Once again, you are listening and watching the Identity Podcast, presented to you by Find Your ID NYC. It's great to be here, and as we continue, let's talk about Earth Day, right? Earth Week, Earth Month, and it's kind of interesting. We went from one singular day to a week. And now there are lots of people and lots of individuals and organizations out there that are now referencing it as an overall month as well, Happy Earth Month and everything. I think one positive thing with the pandemic at the moment is the fact that there's a lot of things that we can do throughout the entire week rather than just on Earth Day, right? We can have an entire Earth Week and have virtual events. I know there's some of you on the call tonight that have been doing things all week long and will continue throughout the rest of the week. And I think that's just an amazing thing in its own right? But I think another thing to mention, another important thing to note for all of our listeners and viewers out there is the fact that Earth Day is every day. It's not just the 22nd of April. It's not just the week of the 22nd of April. It's every day is Earth Day, and every day should be Earth Day. So just something to note there. But as we continue with that, I'd love to hear about kind of the history of Earth Day. And I think no one better than Tom himself can kind of talk about the first Earth Day. Would you like to talk about that a little bit for us tonight?
I'll say a few words about it, but I'm not sure it's that great of a topic for everybody. So I'll just say a couple. And I have to say that I missed from email that I was supposed to do this until about 4:00 this afternoon.
Oh,
so,
no worries.
That's indicative of the preparation I've put into this. But Earth Day really did originate with one person. It was Senator Gaylord Nelson from Wisconsin. He had always been very interested in what in the olden times was usually just known as conservation. And obviously, like outdoor recreation is really important in Wisconsin. And so they were a little ahead, I think, of a lot of places in, water quality and some issues like that. But he was also a really significant consumer advocate. And I think a lot of what his approach to environmentalism was sort of bringing those things together. And as the story is usually told, in January of 1969, he had an opportunity to visit the oil spill then just pouring out over the beaches of Santa Barbara, California. And this is a thing that, you can go back and study. It was a real shock in a lot of people's consciousness. I suppose it didn't hurt that, a lot of very well-to-do people live in Santa Barbara, California. And so if you can get the attention of rich people, it's probably going to be a bigger play in the news. But Gaylord Nelson went out there and observed this and saw the seabirds on the beach and stuff covered in oil, and was so horrified by it. He was really galvanized that he had to do more politically. And so he cooked up this idea that there would be, based on what was going on with the anti-Vietnam War activism at the time, that there would be a great national teach-in on the environment. So he got with a member of the U.S. Congress who was a Republican. He was named Pete McCloskey, and he and McCloskey sort of got planning this, and they knew they needed a young, energetic person. They hired a man named Dennis Hayes. Pardon me, wrong. Do I have the right Dennis? Yeah, Dennis Hayes, who was maybe in college, or maybe just dropped out, or maybe he was in graduate. I don't know. His identity was a little murky at the time, but anyway, he just put together this spectacular event, and practically every college and university in the United States, and it just spread like wildfire, really over much of the rest of the world, joined in. It is claimed that 20 million Americans participated in that first Earth Day. Although, well, that's a big number. You know, that's like 10% of a nation of 200 million at the time. And so that sort of stretches credulity a little bit there. But it did have a tremendous impact. A lot of people learned a lot of things. They learned their neighbors cared about these things, and that mattered. They saw how it was affecting their community, because a lot of times, you know, there were like local speakers who could talk about what was going on with, you know, something like their local recycling programs and so forth. And so anyway, it was a great event. Now, okay, I have said like way too much. I've said about as much as I probably say in this whole entire program. But do you want to hear about my Earth Day in 1970? Is that okay?
Yes, most
all
definitely.
right. So I was on the student council of my high school. I was in second year in high school, and I think all of us were put on a bus and sent to the nearest university where they were doing a pretty big Earth Day. And so here's what I remember. I remember seeing a documentary, and I think it was made, but these are real environmentalists. It was made by Caterpillar Tractor Company on sanitary landfills, which was at that time a recently discovered innovation that you put your garbage, but every single day you buried it, and the difference this made for sanitation in your community was really pretty significant. So I remember seeing a documentary on that. I remember speakers, not what they said. I remember that there were tables and tables and stacks of literature. You could go down the aisle and you could pick up one of each. And it was things like brochures from your federal government, and things like, I remember there were very vividly that there was printed on yellow paper a picture of a young kind of hippie looking guy, long hair, shirtless, but he had on bib overalls. But here's the thing, he was wearing a gas mask. And that was the lived truth of the environmental crisis right there. We were in such trouble. We were all going to be walking around in gas masks in about a year. And so there it is, young Americans, you know, you have to contemplate this. And I think I also saw a play that day from Jean-Claude Van Italy, who is a Belgian American, maybe just Belgian, I don't know. But he'd written a play called America Hurrah. And it was very satirical and very critical of the United States and the modern United States mentality. And it was a play where basically there were people, all the people in it, you know, had terrible problems and needed help. And the other people kind of around them always just responded with cliches. They responded with truisms. They were evasive. They had platitudes instead of like actually doing anything to help solve the problem. And so there was a kind of a beautiful critical element. And the last thing I'll tell you that I remember from my first Earth Day in 1970 was that it was a beautiful blue sky, warm April day. So there you go, Caleb.
Take
Good word. Hi,
Well,
Tom.
thank you, Tom. That's really awesome. You know, I've heard some of that story before, but I just thought it'd be great to have others hear it too. Thank you again for doing that. I'm sorry it was so last minute, but I thought it would be a great addition to tonight, and to be able to kind of let listeners and viewers know. And I think everyone here on the call too kind of know what the first Earth Day was like for you, and also just for the country as well, because I think that's something that most of us maybe don't know, right? And so thank you again for.
It's always
no
hard
idea.
to like trust like 2-sentence takes on historical past. So anybody who can flesh it out even a little bit is usually going to give you some truths that you probably haven't heard before.
That is true. Well, welcome, Tarek. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you. I'm prepared. Yeah, I'm just joking. No, I think that story was
I'm happy
amazing.
for
Yeah, I think that story was great. I don't think you told that story when we interviewed you. Did you tell the original? You didn't say any of those names before.
Not to the extent.
Sure.
Not to the extent.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Tom. For sure. I had no idea that there was so much foreign interest involved at the time as well. I thought it was very much an American crisis at the time. And ironically, I mean, I don't know who's shirtless, but we are wearing gas masks, so I don't know how that all plays into things, but hopefully we're moving in a much better environment. But I don't know. Does anyone else remember their first Earth Day? Because I don't. Hopefully someone else has more chance to think about it while I find something else to say. But
you know,
do you remember yours?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You know, I faintly remember details of grade school and learning more about Earth Day and everything. And I think the first time I ever really remember doing something for Earth Day was probably second or third grade, I think. And my teacher, now that I actually know a little bit more, I guess you could kind of call her environmental advocate herself. She had basically the entire week had a bunch of different plans set together. And one of the things that she wanted us to do was to we'd go outside and we have to like document different types of flowers and trees, like in the gardens around the school. And we'd have to, during that time, we also we're doing like a butterfly segment. So we got to like have our own butterfly in the little like thing. I forget what it's called, the little thing that they have. But yeah, it was a lot of neat stuff. So that was kind of my first experience that I recall of Earth Day and of Earth Week. And I think since then, I'd like to think has helped me positively, because here I am today. So talking about Earth Day. So, but it's great to have you here, Tarek, with the whole crew. It's crazy.
I know. Look at this. It's so funny. I was like in the backstage. I was like, "Am I gonna just push everyone up?" Like, so I'm in a class of my own, of course. No, but I just, this is the biggest we had. So shout out to that. Shout out to everyone in the room. Dr. Lisa Betty, Tom Duncanson, Leslie Webb, Elizabeth Lindbergh, Cassandra. Okay. And me. Oh, okay. And, no, I'm just excited. This is the biggest we've had in a long time. And I'm just curious, like, definitely feel free to jump in whenever. Tom has like led the way for us, like, and where we're going to go with this. So from that point on, we're all just going to jump in and kind of talk about it. I mean, the questions can be definitely poignant, but I really want to see how the synergy of where everyone comes from. Does everyone know who everyone is, by the way? Just for our audience. I know our audience has all met you individually, but have you all met each other, or no?
A little bit. we did a little brief introduction before the show,
awesome.
Getting to know everyone. Tom, meet this person, and Elizabeth, meet this person, that type
Awesome.
of thing. But yeah, I mean, I think it'd be great if everyone would like to
let's do it for the audience
once more.
Let's do it live.
And,
right?
and
Let's go first.
Introduce themselves once more, and from there, what you kind of do and what your niche is and all that. So whoever would like to go first is totally welcome to do so.
I'll go first. What I was going to say was, everyone knows me, obviously, but the quick anecdote, I don't remember my first Earth Day or the last one, but I do remember doing a lot of like Earth conscious things throughout school. I think we planted some trees in like our campus one time, so I'd love to see where those are nowadays. What else did we do? I think one time I did like a full thrifting recycle from like, there was just like a landfill one time, and like I did one of those, and we just like we're picking clothes out. I don't know why we're doing that, but it was we thought it was recycling for the time being, so that was kind of early for that. But most of it was just knowledge about like, kind of like what Tom said, it was a lot of just trauma. A lot of just like the world's going to blow up and we need to do something about it. So I love how the conversations evolve. Like everyone here is bringing such a different aspect to sustainability, whether it be just the knowledge of it, the history, the wisdom of it, and also just like where our bodies are and our placement in this, whether it be gender, race, and all of that, So I'm curious, who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Or Cassandra, you want to go first?
Hey everyone, my name's Cassandra. I'm the founder of Garbage Gang. I'm super excited to be here in the room with everyone. There's a few of you guys that I've been following on socials, and we're socially close with each other, so I'm really happy to be here with some of you, and excited to be talking about our favorite topic, is the earth. For Garbage Gang, we're a movement that empowers people through their trash etiquette and their relationship with garbage. So for us, Earth Day is quite literally every day, and we don't ever stop talking about trash. So we're happy to be in the room.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'll go next. And Cassandra as well. I'm excited to follow you and get to know your story and all of you. I listened to your episodes, so I feel like I already kind of know you. I feel like my sustainability journey kind of started in the beginning of quarantine. I just started, learning more about it and educating myself. And eco-anxiety is real. I feel like I would educate myself a lot and then have to kind of step back and breathe. And so for all of you who have been very aware of it for this long and patient, and bless you. But yeah, I just trying to educate myself more. And I think a lot of what I'm focused on is a sustainable lifestyle. So not only being more eco-friendly and sustainable in that factor, but also, taking that into your career and finding a job that you really love instead of just, going 9 to 5 at a job that you dislike that, just gets you money. So I think it's a well-rounded lifestyle for me.
I'll go next. Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie. I'm a sustainability editor for Peace Sake Candles and Company. It's a small husband and wife candle business, and they, hand pour soy wax, non-toxic candles. And they also have a system where you can recycle the candle and give the candle jar back to them, and they'll reuse it as well. And we also just really want to implement the consumer and the customer reusing the jar also as a planter, as anything to hold something in. So I just kind of started writing about sustainability and simple, easy tips that someone can take into their everyday lives to live a better, sustainable life. So I started writing last year about that for Peace Sake.
I guess it's me. Everyone can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm Lisa Betty. I'm an educator and a earth advocate, and just in general. And a lot of my work has to do with the historical aspects of sustainability in terms of accessibility, representation, as well as anti-colonialism, where I advocate that and activate that anti-colonialism needs to be at the core of any discussion of sustainability and environmentalism at the local framing and then also globally.
I say I didn't retire last year. I quit. And so I quit teaching at Millikan University last year. And I've spent a lot of this year writing mostly about environmental topics. And I've been doing that for 10 years anyway. But I think my big project, and it's a little embarrassing because this could just completely fail. In 2017, I think because I was in Europe anyway, because I had students from the university. I kind of every other year I did our university's London program. So in 2017, I was in Europe, and kind of a opportunity came to me to go to one of the COPs, one of the Conference of the Parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. These are the big meetings you hear about all the time. You're hearing about the meeting coming up in Glasgow, which will be end of October and into November of this year. And this is the Paris Agreement and all that stuff. Well, these meetings are enormous, and there are many facets to them, and only one piece of it is the actual diplomacy where they work out the agreements. The rest of it is a little bit like almost a trade show of climate change, and some of it is a little bit like an academic meeting concerning climate change. But I went to that and I thought I would like to get in the room with the diplomats. And somebody said, well, to get in the room with the diplomats, you have to go to the meetings of the subsidiary bodies. And those meet every year, usually in Bonn. And so I just happened to have a few resources. I was able to go to that. And now I've been to several of those. And I've been to another conference of the party, one of the big meetings. I was at Madrid in 2019. And what's come out of this is my sense is that I would like to take a lot of people to these meetings, because what they do lack is the pressure that only a fellow human being can put on somebody who's doing these deliberations. And I would like to see where within a few years that we citizens go and actually give them grades session by session, because frequently they waste an hour and they don't talk about anything of any value that is likely to bring any positive change at all in the world. It's just all stalling. And if there were people in the room who were bringing that pressure and bringing actual publicity to what is going on in these meetings, I think they would be drastically more effective. So I call this green citizen diplomacy, and maybe I'll be able to get something together, and maybe it's too difficult, maybe it's just too expensive and so forth. But that's kind of my project right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. So at that level, I guess I'm curious about exactly what were you able to do while you were there? Like, what has that experience brought to you, and what changes have been made on that level since you've been able to participate?
Yeah. Well, I mean, personally, it's just been so informative. I think it's just changed my sense of what all this is about. I think that for you or I to go to one of these COPs, to go to Glasgow this autumn, to be in Madrid. Have any of you been? Because thousands of people particularly go to COPs. I wouldn't be surprised if there was somebody in this panel who had been. But I think of them as kind of moral tourism, and like lots of other kinds of tourism, not really very effective. Maybe gratifying for the person who goes and observes, but probably not much greater effect than that. But these subsidiary meetings where you can actually get in the room, you can sit quietly and take notes all day, and you can come out and do something with it. You can, not during a session, but between sessions, you can go up to the diplomats and politely ask them about what they're doing and why they were frustrated at the end of that meeting and things like that. So in those meetings, you're in it, and you could potentially make a lot out of those interactions.
That's awesome. I mean, I guess I can open up the question. What does everyone think is like the greater good that can be kind of done? Tom spoke about kind of creating like a network of people to kind of go to these events, or even if they're more locally, obviously since travel restrictions are in place and stuff like that, and finances, of course, because we're all trying to be activists at the same time, and finances obviously is a big thing for Greenpeace.
If you care about climate, you probably shouldn't be flying all over the world.
That's true. That's true.
Little paradox.
I mean, we can't all bike everywhere,
You're not biking to Glasgow.
But no, there is something to it. So I just opened up the question to the floor. Anyone can jump in. What do you think is like kind of the greater good? I know everyone is kind of putting their own 2 cents in, and you can go into depths about what you're already doing with your projects or your future projects, or just like kind of your dream. What is the dream of Earth Day 2025, 2030? Where do we see this going? Big question, right? You want to start?
I'll say something. I think sustainability as accessibility is the most important aspect for me. Recently, I see that Coca-Cola or Coca-Cola Company, Pepsi Company, all those companies have a new campaign, a recycling campaign, and and on their cans it says 100% recyclable, and they literally recycled the campaign from the 80s that has not worked for 3 decades. And I was just like, do they think we're stupid? So they're not going to do anything when it comes on to plastic consumption and their production of plastic goods for their drinks, soft drinks. They're not going to do anything for the tin. They're not going to try to use their trillions of dollars to create some science in regards to how to package their products sustainably. Instead, they're going to create a narrative to then trick the consumer that they're actually doing absolutely nothing or doing something, but it's actually the same thing that they presented that would help the environment in the 1980s, which was recycling and that kind of conversation around 5-cent deposits and all of that kind of stuff that has not even dented a little bit in what we need to do, and that's created more issues and problems with even where then do these materials go after they're after the 5 cents deposited and they're accumulated. Where did the plastic go? Because then they're shipped off to Malaysia, shipped off to the global south, and so I think I'm more interested at systemically what sustainability looks like, and how accessible it is to just the greater public. That there can be levels to that. I am worried about systemically the manipulation and the power that a lot of these companies that are producing outside of the militaries and military industrial complexes that produce so much environmental distress in our world. But outside of that, the consumerism and the industries that on a day-to-day literally feed us insustainable products every day that people rely on for sustenance. A lot of times people need to use bottled water because there's insecurity in the water that they have to consume in the spaces that they live in. So how do you then, how do you tell people, well, you have to stop drinking bottled water, but at the same time, you're not addressing the systemic issues that of the water crisis their community may be in. So it's like, it's a very hard topic because accessibility means that we have to keep these systemic issues and these people who are in control, which are these large industries, accountable and keep them moving in the direction that they need to be moving, and call them out on their BS that they can't then recycle the same narratives and processes that have not created any dents in or environmental impact in a positive way in kind of this whole scheme of things, that probably have made things worse because they are now over consuming or overproducing these materials, and they want to, for global domination, they want everyone to be able to drink a Coca-Cola. Well, then what are you going to do with those plastic bottles in remote places or in small islands or in spaces where they don't have the capability to recycle in a particular type of way, or to even use the recycled material to then reuse it into something else? So I think that's accessibility and then systemic, and how that looks like together when we intertwine them as really the most important issues when we're dealing with sustainability.
Snap. Did someone have something to say to that, or no? I don't want to interrupt anyone. that blows me away. I mean, we're all mute, but if you could hear us, we're just like, yes, keep going. No, that was right on point. I really feel like kind of what you explained is something that Tom always talks about with these like bigger corporations. That's why he wanted to get in the room with the people moving the money, and that idea of accessibility is entirely like a social construct at the end of the day, on top of a much more systemic financial thing. Though I do believe, I think, especially as far as it's concerned with like water bottles, I think they've found like sustainable ways to actually hold water in like containers that aren't, that detrimental. But despite that, let's target the bigger issues like where's the water and like stuff like that, stuff that like how do we get the water to the people that need it? And these much bigger crises, like obviously capitalist metropolitan cities are overproducing and doing all these other things, but what's the global scale? We don't live on a planet on our own. And sometimes even in my city, I can kind of get lost in the buildings and forget about someone next door, or that someone's like not recycling next door. So I think that accessibility is definitely the key. I'm definitely siding with you on this one, unless someone has a crazy point that's next coming up. But I think in order for us to have this conversation, how could we foster more accessibility, even on a much lower level? I know Cassandra does some cool stuff on her level as well. She can probably tie in right after me. But I do think that how do we tackle the human problem? How do we tackle the idea of what we're actually doing to the environment as far as our just own comfort? And a lot of people are uncomfortable, and that's probably why things are getting overproduced and destroyed, and because it's a survivability at the end of the day, or people chopping down trees for housing or whatever. They think that the idea of what their end goal is to survive as the human race. And ultimately, it's like we haven't found a way to come into harmony with the earth in that sense. So I think we can access that by creating kind of like what Tom said, talking to diplomats, getting political organizations and foundations that will actually work. But Lisa and I are very skeptical about this most of the time. We've talked about this a lot. All those are fine and dandy, but they're just such a drop in the bucket. Not to play that water pun again, but to this much bigger crisis. So let's do something. Let's change today. Let's make this a new Earth Day for sure.
Oop. Yeah, I think that was also beautifully said. Thank you so much, Lisa. I think that's like definitely like top of the line, like where everything comes from and stems from, and where we really need to tackle this issue. It's a top down, bottom up problem, right? We've all got our hands in it in some way. And for some, it's like their only option is to be purchasing bottles for clean water. Like everyone deserves to be drinking clean water. And the fact that we have in North America so many areas that are underwater watch is absolutely the first problem. And for Garbage Gang, we are all about empowering people through their trash habits. And we really highlight that all of us are trash. We all have a level of garbage that we are bringing into our worlds and things that we're doing in our spaces. And so for us, I think that if we were to share, like, where do we begin? It's just start at home, start with what you've got and have a look at your bins, and we say that about so many different things, like look inside you and start here. But that's really where we would say to start. And in what areas could you reduce your waste, right? Yes, we have to buy bottled water, but could you buy one of the large jugs that's like 25 liters, right? And maybe if it can be more affordable for us to be able to get that water available. And yogurt, this is one that we don't think about often, but we can throw away like 6 of those little yogurt containers every day. Just buy one of those big liter ones if you know that you're going to do it all the time, right? So it's making small changes that you can at home, and then it's like knocking on the doors of the big guys. Like, okay, so what's up? What are we doing with all this money? Because the companies at a large scale will greenwash to have you think that you are doing something sustainable. And then we have to like come back home and say, okay, wait, are we really doing it? I mean, there are even areas where I've been in an airport. I'm going to call out Texas. I was at a Texas airport, and they had a bin that was like garbage and recycling. And so you're sorting your bins, and don't I watch the garbage guy pick out the garbage and put them both in the same damn bag, you know, so you think that you're doing something good. And so there are so many spaces that we really need to work on and do what you can. The problem is large and we're in it together. We've all got to do our part. You know, it starts with individual and then we work our way systemic down, up and sideways. We've all got to be involved in this.
Yeah, I very well said, Cassandra, and I completely agree. And you know, something you touched on is that something I've noticed is a lot of cities are actually doing that now as well, where they'll begin recycling programs in their city, and what they'll do is that they'll just put the recycling in the same truck as the garbage truck when they come pick it up and everything. And that is like, well, what's the point, right? Because technically we are paying, part of our taxes are paying for the recycling trucks to come by and pick it up and everything. Then what's the point there? And I think everything that you said there was spot on, and everything that Lisa said was an amazing way to really start this conversation. So wow, definitely amazed.
Garbage is new, right? Like garbage didn't exist forever. And we are really a generation where we were told like, throw your stuff away. And there's this like magical land of away that we believe that there are fairy garbage people that are sorting through it, that we're doing a good job at it. And it's starting to really unveil, like everything else, that it's just not the system that we think it is. And it's just not happening in the ways that we really need it to.
Yeah, I think I can speak on that a little bit. So actually at my farm, it's a big land now where we took over like other people's property, and it's kind of crazy how 100 feet away they have their dump site where they just took their trash. And so we can go look at that now, and there's still just like the perfectly like unfazed plastics there, that it's just like, how long has it just been sitting here? And like, that's what they used to do. They used to just throw it over in the woods and that was it. But I know I'm frustrated with cities because I was living in New Orleans and recycling. And then I knew you could just watch the garbage trucks, just like you said, just pick them all up at the same time. So with that, I live in St. Louis now, and I'm trying to recycle. And I talked to Cassandra. There's so many specific things that you have to do to make sure you do it perfectly. But I still try to do my best, and then I take the recycling to a local recycling drop off. So hopefully, I mean, if anyone's doing it right, it's hopefully them. And like, if I'm out, if I have like a water bottle or something, I'll make sure I bring it home and recycling it instead of, investing the movie theater or wherever I am to recycle it. So just some little tips for people to try and help recycle.
That's great to hear. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Yeah,
My apologies.
No, you're fine. Just to kind of unpack that, I was just thinking about how a community aspect of really just thinking about educating others about what is recyclable and how to recycle properly, because there's a lot of communities that don't know how to recycle properly. And then once it gets to the facility, it gets thrown out, unfortunately, because it's either dirty, or there's a pizza box that has grease in it that's not recyclable, things like that. So I think it's important for people to understand and to educate themselves on, what each plastic is. Is it recyclable at this facility? Where can I recycle it at? I think that's just a huge aspect in community engagement and education as well.
Yeah, totally well said, everyone. I mean, I think we've tackled this. I love the recycle pun, by the way, Lisa. It just hit me. It just like came back around. How can we recycle campaigns that have not been used before or weren't helpful? It's like recycling plastic of sorts by throwing it into the trees. And I think that we have to find some new ways to kind of come up with what to do with these bigger corporations or what they're doing with that. My next question was, and this is like to all the writers, and I think everyone's a phenomenal writer because I hear the way you speak. How have you used your voice to change the environment, as well as how has that eco-journalism space been for you? And I'm sure everyone can touch on it from a different layer. I know Tom writes as well, Leslie writes, Lisa. I think Cassandra's going to be starting some stuff as well. So And Elizabeth, you do some stuff too, so everybody just jump in. Caleb, you write some eco-conscious stuff too, right?
I'm
You've written some articles. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I'm the only one that's probably not doing journalism other than this, but so you guys jump in for sure. But I'm curious, how do you use your voice? How is the space about it? Is it a lot of recycled conversation of everyone just like, we got to do our part, or like, we got to do this? Like, is there any agendas being pushed? Is there something new? Is there some sort of blockage that you've noticed in that space? Like, what have you learned about that, using your voice and just journalism?
I think that Leslie made such a good point, and I think we've all kind of touched on this, but there's not a lot of education that exists in how you can exist sustainably in general. And so Garbage Gang is continuing to unfold as an organization that shares the many ways that you can be more sustainable. I think that we use our voice to really talk about the fact that we can't avoid it. You know, the term zero waste is a little scary for some people because it's like, okay, I literally just like breathe. This is it. Like, this is all that I'm able to do. And I think that for us, it's important to just share how simple it could be. You know, saying no to straws, refusing coffee cup lids if you need to get your coffee. Or I listened to this really cool podcast the other day that talked about cutting your carbon footprint in half by doing everything that you do in half. You know, if you are someone who drives to work, can you maybe half the week drive with somebody to carpool together? And all of these little things matter and can make up a big impact. So we try to positively empower without really draining on how big the problem is by little simple, sustainable steps that can lead to big impact if we're all doing a little part. But that's a little bit about what Garbage Gang really stands for in general, is just being able to make it simple.
Nice. Anyone else want to go? Or go, Leslie.
Yeah, I'll go. I kind of do the same with my blog. So I try to write and just kind of give some easy tips for people to be able to either switch options or reuse options, because I want to kind of have my tips of sustainability in a way that kind of hopefully has a large audience for anyone to really try. So it could even be reusing, you know, a plastic package that you use, because I really push the aspect of reusing instead of throwing it out, recycling. How can you reuse it first? Can you wash and reuse it? So for example, like I buy frozen fruit sometimes, and sometimes it comes in that plastic bag, you know, and it's a pretty thick plastic. I guess it's called good plastic. I don't know, but you can reuse that and wash it and use it for something else to store in. So I really just try to implement in my blogs about simple steps to reuse something first and think about it, or even just thinking about what you buy and how you can use it again, or what it's going to impact in the end.
Yeah, I think in our podcast you spoke about, I didn't try it yet, but growing the onions as well. Indoor gardening is definitely a cool thing. And I know, Elizabeth, are you using your land to grow anything as well?
Not right now. I'm really hoping because I don't live there, so I think like starting a garden, keeping it up right now would be difficult. But I hope once I do live out there to do a full garden and maybe even bamboo. Bamboo farming. We'll see.
Oh yeah, you did mention that. Yeah, bamboo farming. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, bamboo is just, so many things are being made out of bamboo nowadays, and it's such an easy crop and doesn't require pesticides, less water, and it actually like helps the environment. It like produces oxygen 30% more than any other plant out there. So yeah, that's kind of my future goals.
That's dope. Shout out to bamboo. For sure, for sure. Do you guys up there want to say anything? They have like the wealth of knowledge. They're just like, what should I say? What about you, Tom? You haven't said anything in quite a... Oh, you have something, Caleb?
No, go ahead.
You got something, Tom? What have you been writing?
Well,
what's your latest piece?
One of the things I finished recently was a analysis of the tweets of Greta Thunberg and oh gosh, who else? Emily Atkins. But I am guilty of doing academic writing, and of course we only have tiny audience, and we usually just kind of have contempt for one another, so we don't even really read one another. So it's a little bit like writing for nothing. So it's one of those things that makes you question whether or not it's really important to make a transition to find a real audience. So thanks a lot for asking.
Interesting. I guess that kind of goes to my original obstacle question, in the sense of like, there's a limit to how many people are even reading it or even getting this information. And, you know, if it is a top-down thing and the true academics are not reaching the people that need to hear it, we're in this like endless cycle for sure. So I think it's interesting that you mentioned the trending stars, the trending eco-conscious stars right now. It's almost like you're saying, like, let's make Earth Day hip again, which is pretty funny. But do people use hip? They don't, right?
I certainly don't. I just started using Vibe. Apparently that's pretty popular.
Okay, so Earth Day is a vibe to all of our younger audiences. And I think it's interesting. So like, I would love to read one of your pieces. It's probably some jargon in there that I probably won't understand, but I think finding ways, and I think we've also spoken about this, Tom, of you just finding your voice to start to talk to people, you know, for whatever, you know, from all levels of thinking and research is going to be awesome, whether it be through podcasting or, you know, just outreach in a lot of different ways. I think that'll help a lot for sure.
I think that we're in too much of an emergency to say that. You know,
That's fair.
I wish it were true. I wish I had, you know, centuries to throw my little bit on the pile and think that it will add up to something with all the other contributions in the pile. But I'm a little worried that the problem is too urgent.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, does that take away from what we're all doing though? I mean, it's we don't want to discourage people in the sense that like I already said, it's a drop in the bucket. So I guess that does kind of come up kind of weird. But you obviously have seen this from the inception. And I'm calling back to Lisa. When was the first Earth Day? Was it before the 80s? Because Lisa was calling to the 80s and the whole Greenpeace and everyone trying to recycle and those initiatives. 1970. So about
1970. But by the 80s, that's when they start to popularize kind of recycling and you know, that type of method in the 90s, because you know, that's when I was born, like Captain Planet in the 90s. That's when I'm a Captain Planet kid. So that had an important bearing on the way I thought about systemically, but you know, they cut that out because they were like, oh, they're radicalizing a whole generation, because literally people that are at least like two years younger than me and 2 years older than me, like in that framework, we have the same type of like looters and polluters out the way, like thinking like systemically, because at least in that show, and you know, my nephew is young, so I see the types of shows that he's watching, and it's a lot of consumerism. There's nothing about, at least with Captain Planet, you had 5 international teenagers from all over the globe who had to come together and, you know, create this kind of like mythical figure that could help them when they couldn't combat industries, not like a guy on the street throwing a plastic on the ground, but like these large industries that were like going for rainforests, these large industries that were polluting waterways. Like that's what I saw. So I saw more of the systemic, even in this cartoon, but I don't know why there should be. I think it's been maybe almost 30 years since Captain Planet, just about 25 years, and why there hasn't been that type of show in recent. That's what also tells me that there's a lot more going on systemically to even quell any type of large scale kind of disruption and dismantling of these systems, and even questioning of these systems. The fact that they can come in and have these commercials that say, yeah, we're starting this new initiative where we're going to recycle. It's like, didn't we do that like already? But it's kind of like starting. I feel like we're in the 80s again. And that's very problematic after, all of these strides, at least a radicalization of a generation of young people around certain kind of media that we were seeing and that at least supported our understanding of the environment outside of any type of ancestral or familial kind of connection, because my family were farmers. So like I had some kind of understanding of what was weird and what wasn't weird and all of that kind of stuff. But that also scares me. You have a generation of kids that are growing up knowing certain things, but it's not directly. There's no media representation that talks about composting. There's no media representation that talks about water justice. There's no like Captain Planet, and that was I think it was very revolutionary. And I don't know how many seasons of Captain Planet there was, maybe like 4. But for an urban kid who, me, working class urban, who's also very much removed from our kind of very sustainable, what would be seen as sustainable, eco-friendly, this, that, and the other, but it's really just how we were living for hundreds of years, and before that as Afro-Indigenous people, African people in Jamaica, enslaved and trying to figure out ways outside of the plantation system and all of that stuff. That's what we did. We were sustainable, we were ecological, we needed the land, so why would we destroy it? Something that we needed to feed us. But at the same time, for me to be removed from that situation, but still able to access some of the language in a modern way through media was important. I don't know if the next generation has that same thing. They do have, a more political understanding, which is important, where you have the youth who are coming about in very important ways. But the fact that they're kind of going against the mainstream. There's just like, I wish 5-year-olds had TV shows that talked about this, that could, in latent terms, really just like connect them with these ideas. And then those same TV shows not be like brought to you by Coke. I don't know. Like, I feel like there's just a lot going on. Yeah. And I just feel like there's a lot going on that we didn't have because, pharmaceutical companies couldn't in the 90s, pharmaceutical companies couldn't advertise. There was just a lot more restrictions and a lot less power that these industries had versus now, where it feels as if I just feel more powerless when it comes onto these things at this point, because these systems have gotten a lot larger. Like bottled water in the 90s wasn't even a thing. You would be like, bottled water, you're rich. Like tap, like, maybe I have a filtration system. We had a filtration system, but we drank tap water. I thought people who drank bottled water were weird. So there's just like certain things that now everybody drinks bottled water, and it's around the globe. And now, and waterways have gotten worse. So it's just, I think what scares me is that there are political understandings, but is that political understanding accessible? Some of the information, is it positioned as by mainstream media as super radical to the point where the normal person may not be able to, your average person may not be able to, or are told not to assess that information, told that it's not for them, because it being environmentalism and sustainability outside of my family coming to me on my TV screen on Saturday mornings was really important. Like to this day, I brush my teeth within a minute and I turn off the water because Captain Planet told me to. And I think that's important, especially for urban people who are removed, in particular, working class people who are removed from a specific lineage who are removed from some of the cultural sustainability tactics that they had before and strategies that they had before, purely by displacement, exile, diaspora, all those things, because that's important to know how in these modern spaces, these different spaces, in different contexts how to access sustainability, particularly if you're removed. I'm the first generation born in the Northeast urban US. My family is from the South and from Jamaica. Their sense of sustainability is very, very different, closer to the earth. And it's just, I'm barely, their carbon footprint is a lot different than mine, just being born up here in the time and space context that I am in. And I understand that. And so I needed to access sustainability differently than they had to, where my grandmother would just tell my mom to bring, food scraps up to the land where we had a food scrap pile. That's what composting is. Now it's just different for me. And so I wish, I love the youth and what they're doing, but I wish there was more support of the youth and just like movement base of just like accessible media, that cartoons that young people had access to around the world, where they can see how sustainability looks like around the globe, and they can assess it and think about things even in a systemic way. Like I literally at 8, I knew just, that there's larger things going on other than me putting, my bottle in a blue container and saying, I did it. No, I knew that there was, like the Amazon is at risk. I knew that at 9 because of the certain things I had access to, the media I have access to. And I don't know if kids have that same access and young people have that same access to that media to kind of normalize that discussion. In the same way that I needed it to be normalized when I was young.
Yeah, okay, I was gonna say something. I think it's very awesome. I think we should create a cartoon out of you. So let's start there. You're our new Captain Planet. We're gonna animate you. I hope you're ready. No, I think also too, we're dating ourselves. Sorry, with all that going on in the background. We're dating ourselves with the idea of TV. How many people are actually sitting around the TV and like centralized in that particular aspect?
Exactly.
There's a lot.
It'd be more like social media or YouTube.
And how many avenues? There's algorithms that literally aggregate you to, like, if you like trash, you're gonna have a lot of trash on your feed, and that's okay. Like, we're all living in these bubbles now that are very awkward. So I think the other aspect of it, before I forget what I was thinking, the other thing is cartoons are great, but this distortion of reality is kind of interesting too, because I think what's great is that you were able to find these out at such an early age, and you're like, okay, this is going to stay with me for the rest of my life. Like, I'm going to brush my teeth like this for the rest of my life. And I love that you're preaching systemic learning, and like, okay, the more we do this with our youth, obviously that's going to be the future generation, because that's who's going to inherit the earth afterwards. So we should be training them in the right way. I have seen some cartoons. They're not, they're not even on the same intellectual level as what we grew up on. But that's a whole nother thing. It's definitely consumerism. It's a lot faster. They're not really processing a lot of information, and they're moving very quickly, which means they're probably consuming and throwing away stuff a lot quicker than we were as well. So I guess the main thing I was going to say is the distortion of reality, in the sense of, because it's a cartoon, when things got really hot, people kind of called Captain Planet, and we don't really have that in the sense, that's why I kind of made that joke earlier. So I wonder if, the newer cartoons would have some sort of way to, like, hey, go talk to your local, diplomat, or write this letter, or, on top of all the stuff that we already had, like turning lights off and recycling, and these new innovative ways, like maybe switching over to solar, or even knowing what that is. Because Tom actually, in his episode, spoke a lot about energy. I don't know if we'll talk about that as much today, but just like energy usage and how that all goes and plays into everything. And then financially, like, why people use things with the accessibility that they have, because they have it. It's a luxury, or to them, probably a necessity. So I'm curious. I think we should put a bid in. We should, like, let some people know that, like, with our powers combined, no one else has a ring, but we can probably make something great happen. And I think yeah, I'm going off on a tangent, but I think that there are ways to kind of do this, and I think what we're doing with our podcast, is kind of that. Our biggest demographic, Caleb can probably tell us, they're a lot younger than you would expect, but what you're targeting is like 5-6-year-olds, like that are just coming out, and I think that's why the trending aspect of Greta Thunberg is so amazing, because like this very innocent face of this young woman with this very progressive thought process that we've all kind of taken a step back and said that maybe we're not doing enough, or maybe I can't do enough within myself. And she's just like, nah, we're going to keep pushing forward. And of course we need that. Of course it's trending, but it is not the norm. And I don't know if you've talked to anyone younger than 10 or so about ego consciousness, but they're definitely more politically active because that's mainstream. God rest his soul, George Floyd, the situation that happened with that's in their face. Like, they're dealing with political stuff in a very integrated way that we probably didn't. Like, my grandmother one time moved the bus stop because she like wrote to the local whatever, because it was just too far away from where she had to go. And it confused me that it even moved, that it was even a possible thing. So, I'm seeing much more visceral things happen in a political sphere that may not necessarily be a moral sphere. Like, we're morally conscious. We're very ambitious about like, let's do this because we have to. Whereas they're going to do it because it's probably more mainstream. I don't know if that's an issue, as opposed to like, we have to target them with what they like. A lot of them are trying to fit in. A lot of them are still going through puberty. And it may be difficult to be that outsider at this particular moment, especially given Zoom calls and all that other stuff. So being in a Zoom class, most of the people that are affecting you, besides your teachers, who you don't see on a daily basis, is your immediate family. So it's dope that you have that ancestral connection, and everyone else has these ancestral connections that kind of, tie us back into what we're doing. But I think we should create a cartoon, all in all, for sure. I think that's kind of the end of what I wanted to say, for sure.
I think
Make it a cultural norm. I think that's the biggest thing, outside of just being super political. Sustainability is not a political stance. It's like, it's norm. It's the norm. This is abnormal. Being unsustainable is abnormal, and it's only really the past like 150 years with capitalism, white supremacy, and colonialism at its height, and slavery. That's when unsustainable practices had to hit a high. That's when those types of kind of societal systems became the norm. But that's not normal. Being unsustainable is not normal. Sustainability is normal. And so we have to reacculturate ourselves to those spaces. And a cartoon, I mean, that would help me. I'd stare at that cartoon. I still watch cartoons.
Of course.
The Redux, Garbage Gang. I think Cassandra is.
Yeah, go Cassandra. You were gonna say something?
I was gonna say, man, we've talked about it before, and having like No Waste Mans as like an actual like cartoon that we can put out and have like all of our bins as characters, and being able to like make it a very fun. I mean, if for anyone that's followed us before, we make it fun and simple, and we want it to be very like, hey, this is just what's normal, And I think what I'm hearing that each of us have said is like the parallel of like the captain. What's his name? Damn, I'm forgetting.
Planet.
Captain Planet, the Greta Thunberg, as well as Bill Nye the Science Guy, right? It's the power of one. It's the power of one person who was actively like, hey, let's do the thing, and let's make it fun, and let's make it very like accessible and very like, everyone should be doing this. Wait, are you not doing this? Like, why aren't you doing this? And it really spreading the awareness that it should be a little bit more abnormal if you're not, I mean, I've even been on dates where I've like not really been so turned on if they don't recycle and compost. I'm like, do you care about anything? Like, the power of one feels like it can also have a big ripple effect. I mean, we're 7 people in this room who also, I'm positive, have a rippled effect into like our close friends and family on the ways that we talk about sustainability. So it's being able to make it more norm. I totally agree, Lisa. Is just like, how do we make it more like this? This is what's normal, not the amount of unsustainable practices we've built into our society.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I just wanted to kind of put a little input from a conversation that I was previously a part of. It was talking about being on Instagram and using the word sustainability and Earth Day and take action. And their ads, these companies' ads, were getting denied because they were using those words and they were too political. So it was the conversation was kind of like, is sustainability a dirty word? And it's just interesting to see that these companies that are trying to help, and I think they used the word hemp, and they were getting, silenced or ghosted or whatever it's called on Instagram, and their ads just weren't being used. So we kind of just started talking about a new approach to be able to appeal to people, because I think even for me personally, I did like one post where it was just like talking about fear and kind of like instilling fear in people, but that's not the way to get people's attention. Like scaring them isn't gonna, they're gonna be like, no, it's gonna be a turnoff for them. So it's how can you make sustainability appeal to them, and for more the older age, not younger, but like sex appeal or emotion, and just kind of like telling your story and making it like a cool thing to do. I think is a nice little twist approach, because I think before I was kind of approaching it and like, you have to do this, like the world's gonna end, like, and in a scary way, and that's just gonna turn people off. So yeah.
I agree. I think there was, I think it was Japan, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a political leader that was really trying to push like making it sexy to be sustainable. So like we totally need it for our generation too. Like it should be hot. Like that should be something. I think Tarek and Caleb, I think we talked about this on the podcast too. Like we totally needed a dating app with like your sustainability habits and like a tracker, you know? Like, does this, it's like you have your height, your age, your sign, and like the kind of recycling.
How much trash you recycle this week?
I'm down.
I want to see pictures.
Making it more a part of culture, right? How do we create a culture shift around trash where for the longest time, like our garbage has been like, ugh, like it's not my trash, not my problem. We also use the term garbage and trash as like nouns for things like experiences, which is wrong, like we shouldn't be calling our experiences out in trash. Where can we compost that? Can we compost that culture and flower a new initiative to be able to really take garbage for what it is and not something for what you can, think of it as? So I'm all for changing the culture of how we treat our garbage and how we talk about sustainability. Make it sexy and also make it really like everything.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that has been said thus far, and I think not only should we make it sexy, we should make it the norm, but it's, to me, I think, and I'm sure most of us can agree, it almost seems like common sense, right? To do some of these things and to be able to treat the earth in a positive, good, natural manner, because we're not on this earth to do whatever the heck we want, right? We're on this earth so that way, because we are part of this earth, right? And I know I had this conversation with someone and they kind of laughed at me like, what, you're silly, and like, no, I'm serious. It really is the truth. But I think everything that's been said thus far is completely accurate. And to kind of go back with something that Tarek said earlier, was kind of, using our voice with writing and everything. And we can use this right now with this topic too. It doesn't even have to do with writing, but rather our voice in general, right? And I think that's something that's really important. And we all are using our voices in different ways, whether that be writing, whether that be social media, whether that be simply just helping with lifestyle changes. Maybe it's educating. Maybe it's something that Tarek and I are doing right here. And that's a podcast, right? We're able to talk about this via a podcast. I have a blog where I write about sustainability, and I write about my life as being a plant-based eater, right? And all that. And that allows me to put my voice out there in a different way than what I maybe say all the time on the podcast as well. But it's two mediums, two forms that I'm able to put out there and I'm able to share. And then if you know me well enough, I'm a talker. So I'm constantly word of mouth, it constantly mentioning things of like, hey, don't forget you should recycle that, or don't forget to be conscious of this thing or anything like that. And so I think our voices is a very big thing. But to backtrack yet again, it's the whole getting to the norm where our voices are able to be heard constantly and everything. And I think one beautiful thing of social media is the fact that we can put our voice out there. We can put our opinion, we can put our voice out there, we can promote things, we can promote sustainability and such like that. But there's a downfall from that, because there's, you can put your voice out there, but it doesn't mean that there's going to be a whole lot of people that interact with it, right? It doesn't mean that you're going to change an entire generation from it. But I'd also like to say that's okay, right? Here on the podcast, we're not trying to gain every single listener in the world. We're just trying to feature and pinpoint the individuals that are doing amazing things in this world. The ones that aren't, all of you right here on the screen that I'm looking at, and doing the things that are allowing this earth, allowing this country, this world to go tick, 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 and to continue day by day by day, right? And that right there is, one of the beauties of life and of living sustainably as well, is being able to just go out there and tell the truth and tell it raw and natural, and then be able to also share that input and that information and everything. And I love what everyone is talking about here, has been putting more onto the pile, adding to it and allowing it to grow. So if you were watching, if you were listening to the Identity Podcast Earth Day special here, please, by all means, interact with us and by all means, do your part and become sustainable, because it's a lot easier than we think, right? And it's something that should be the norm, should be taught to us at a young age, and should be something that I think is a casual thing to do, right? Whether that be in our Instagram bio, hey, I took this much trash out today, or I picked this much trash up today, or I helped with this cool thing outside, whatever it may be. Or if it's a dating app where it's like Tinder on environmental side, and we can match up with other sustainable advocates and stuff like that, or whatever it may be. It's the fact that you're able to find that voice and you're able to put it out there, right? And so I think it's great to know that everyone here has been able to use their voice in different ways and continuing to. And I think something to mention before I end my rant, something to mention though for this is the fact that we're constantly learning, right? We're still developing, and no one is perfect, and we all mess up with something, or maybe made a mistake in some sort of way when it comes to this type of thing, especially sustainability. And so obviously I think what's great about this special here and to have this roundtable is the fact that we're all able to learn from each other, to pick up different tips and tricks. I've already written down about 5, and just being able to grow from here. And that's, to be honest, if we get anything out of this, that's what I hope, is the fact that we can each grow from it, right? But in the rant, but to continue with the next thing, I think it's really
Hold on.
the
Did
way.
anyone have to add to that? I know some people had popped in for a second. No, okay, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're totally fine. But to kind of continue with that mindset and everything, our voices, it kind of leads to this impact of Earth Day, of Earth Week, right? And how that has kind of become a big thing. So what does everyone kind of think how Earth Day has affected, maybe putting your voice out there when it comes to the environment sustainability, or simply just educating the youth as well?
I think go ahead, Leslie.
Thanks. I was just kind of really thinking about our education system and how, we did learn about Earth Day in school, and I don't remember my first Earth Day in school, but I remember learning a segment about doing something for the earth, in elementary school. But I was just really thinking about, how we aren't really taught anything about sustainability, or I wasn't taught about anything about sustainability or reusing or recycling much in elementary school. So I was just thinking about kind of, who really creates this education system, and how do we really implement sustainability or reusing and reducing any kind of, education about climate or, the environment at an early age?
Yeah, what I was going to say is, like, I think we mentioned earlier that education is that's where I found out about Earth Day, and that's kind of what all this means. I think that I wish we had like someone that wasn't from America, but Japan, they actually have like these like games that the children play, and I think after every school session, they all have to clean up the environment and their like space. It's like every day they have to do this, and I just think it's like a cultural thing, kind of like Lisa said. It's the more systemic, like the more we can put it into, earlier parts of our lives, whether it be, playing or education or whatever. But as far as Earth Day is concerned, and Earth Week, and as it's become Earth Month, hopefully it's Earth Year forever. But I think a lot of what's happening is just the conversations being had. We're all coming together on this particular subject. We've had nothing but conversations all month about this, and it just needs to be said. Whether it be February when we were actually addressing race and women for March. I think all these things need to be said and continued, and I think that's kind of what it is. So the consistency of Earth Day itself, though I still don't remember any of those names, Tom. You have to bring those names back. Like I don't know exactly who started it, but with his initial vision, there you go. Anyone else remember that? No? Okay. To push his agenda forward, obviously, is to continue to just like progress. I don't I don't think it's just recycling. I don't think it's just the knowledge. I don't think it's just that. I don't think we have the perfect answer either. But I do think having that conversation, constantly pushing it forward, and maybe us all taking a trip out to Madrid with Tom one day would be awesome. I think these are all things that are actually important for Earth Day. Each one of us having our own individual experience, and then using our voice to create a bigger experience for the youth. Like that's all we can be asked of. That's what I think.
I completely agree with you.
I wanted to say a joke to Tom too. I was like, so what do you think is making Earth Day so sexy these times? He laughed last time when we said that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure it is that sexy. I think, God, I hate to, pull the old guy card, but I think that it comes and it goes. It goes in and out of fashion. And there have been some Earth Days that things have really reached heights. And there are other times when we turn away from these questions. I mean, we really turn away. I remember teaching environmental advocacy as a freshman seminar. And I don't know if any of you can appreciate what that means, but that's like really hard to teach freshman seminar because they don't pay any attention at all. But I think I did it for 2 years, and the second year was 9/11, and it's like the whole country turned at just like this much off of questions like environment and many others, and turned toward a concern about national security. So there are times when these topics are really welcome, and people are, it's just like the fruit of the age, and now it's come into blossom. Now it's come into the time when we can do it. And other times it is really difficult to find an audience for these messages. In 1978, we tried for a few years something called SUN. Now be careful, SUN, S-U-N, new word, day. And Sunday was really a turn towards energy concerns. And the very first Sunday was sexy. The main speaker was Robert Redford. I think,
I get it.
I guess he's an icon, or what was. Now he's just a pathetic old guy. But he was an icon for that. But, you just if you have a century or multi-century, in this case, problem, you're going to have to be prepared for things changing. What Leslie said about education in the 70s and 80s, we had great emphasis on environmental education. The byword of at least American science education was called STS, Science, Technology, and Society. And they got to the place where not only were they teaching things that were socially oriented and environmentally oriented in science classes, they wanted to push their kids so far, they became advocates. Elizabeth, in South St. Louis, there's a state park dedicated to dinosaurs or something like that. That was created by 8th graders whose teacher organized them to go out and fight for this. And she did like 100 other amazing projects where those kids went out and did science in their communities. But those of you in this conversation who are on the youngest end of this, you grew up in an era where science education is all STEM. And that's about getting a job and being a good neoliberal worker in the vineyard of capitalism, So science education has its fashions too. And when those fashions change, these environmental messages, just the reception isn't as good.
Yeah. Lisa, were you saying something?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just agreeing with Tom and saying standardized testing also took a toll on that type of education. I think for the good teachers I had, well, they weren't all good, but for the ones that we did have, they were environmentally inclined and socially inclined. And we learned a lot about them. I think with Chernobyl happening, I remember at least I had a generation of teachers that were aware and that were trying to kind of push some type of environmentalism type of theme or knowledge base. And Chernobyl, we always like, I saw the Chernobyl documentary probably twice or something. Like it was pretty intense. And then my family members would see the Chernobyl documentary, and we would see just certain things that allowed us to, at least in our education system, to normalize, as we were saying, normalize that this is discussion that needs to happen. But I think at this moment, it's not like that, where you have climate crisis deniers and people wanting to have a very strict view of what the education system is, which is really just standardized testing and preparing students for tests. I think my biggest thing, just as a historian, is really adding in, because Tom, you noted capitalism, adding in that, I noted that the first 150 years, that's when we're seeing this issue modernize in a particular type of way. And we're seeing this issue as, what petroleum, those are all things that are coming up, modern usage, even plastic. This is modern usage, but this is a problem, a 500-year problem, a problem of colonialism, a problem of imperialism and extraction and destruction. And, along with genocide and chattel slavery, there were, environmental resource depletion, swamps that were drained, animals that were eradicated and called pests. And there was just like a lot of things, the kind of way that we've had to acculturate to a society that has been dysfunctional, globally for 500 years based upon these types of things. So I think what has really happened, the reason why there's a lot of climate crisis deniers and just politically climate crisis and sustainability is a bad word, is because of the fact that particularly for Indigenous people, Black, brown people at the intersection of Black, brown, Indigenous have pushed sustainability as attached to or unsustainable practices as attached to capitalism, colonialism, white supremacy. And if when we're talking about sustainability, we have to talk about all of those things. And if we don't, we're not doing anything. And so we're at a point where they rather not talk about sustainability because they don't want to talk about the other things anyway. So they rather have the Flint water crisis. They rather have pipelines being built and all of that. I think that's what made it political. When those connections were being made to Black, Brown, Indigenous, positionalities, that's when it became, okay, we can't talk about sustainability because that means that we can't extract resources where we want to. That means we can't go into the Congo rainforest. We can't go into the Amazon rainforest and do what we've been doing for the past 500 years. We can't do that anymore. And that our bottom line, that messes with our bottom line, that messes with our profit, that messes with the systems that we have in place. So I think that's the how sustainability has been politicized. It's a bad word because it's connected to liberation and sovereignty and autonomy, particularly for the people at the intersection of Black, Brown, Indigenous. And the greater society and those who control society don't want sustainability because that means liberation. And liberation means an alternative society where they're not in control. I said too much. They're going to come for me. What?
You just dropped the mic. Drops mic. I'm out. No, that was amazing. You said so many tidbits. I'm sure. Does anyone want to jump in?
Pops in.
They pull her away. No, not Captain Planet.
You really touched on amazing stuff. I just wanted to jump in and just say I was just thinking about the connection between people on the planet and how that's implementing right now. Instead of just thinking about the planet and saving the planet, we have to think about how the planet affects the people as well, especially the people who are on the frontline communities of climate change. And so I think just the interconnections of people on the planet is what environmentalism is turning into now. And it's why it's so important to discuss it and to educate people about the connections between the two.
Yeah, I love that. I've even had a good friend who was picking up trash in an inner city, and she went on her own solo cleanup. And even just doing that small little bit herself, she felt so much more connected to nature, even while she was surrounded by none of it. We all live here. It's all our planet. And I think that we all can do a better job at taking care of it. So I think it's just start where you are, do what you can, and forgive yourself for the way that capitalism has really taken over our society. And we're all fighting the same fight.
For sure. I think what's being kind of said is that if it's not mainstream, it almost kind of loses its value, and I don't think that's the case. Especially since swimming upstream has become an issue. Elizabeth touched on the hashtag blocking. That's a huge thing. Obviously, the much more overt things there was a huge initiative that was happening for the pipelines. There was a couple different ones, but the most recent one. It got to a point where I was oh, wow, this is actually going to be a good thing. We're going to push back. And sure enough, they still built it. So it was there's a lot of we're fighting a much bigger thing here in the sense of as long as we keep trying to connect to these bigger sources, we're using platforms like Instagram, we're using things that are all already streamlined and they're in pocket with these much bigger organizations, we're not going to be able to do anything. So I do think it's this individual idea that's a collective individual body that's actually trying to create something better. So I think that's the best way to go.
Yeah, a gang. We're a garbage gang.
Oh, a garbage gang of sorts. That's awesome. Yeah. So I think what I was going to mention too is once this passes. Sorry.
Well, while
this
is
yeah, go.
Yeah, while this is happening, just a quick reminder, thank you everyone for listening and watching the Identity Podcast. Again, presented to you by Find Your ID NYC. Of course, this is the Identity Podcast Earth Day special. That's right, episode 37. We're so grateful to be here featuring just a full cast of amazing individuals: Lisa Betty, Leslie Webb, Elizabeth Lindbergh, Cassandra Carmelina, and Tom Duncanson, and of course your lovely host Tarek and myself. But we are here, and Tarek, go ahead and go. You can take it away if you're ready.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, besides the noise and light pollution that I deal with on a daily basis, that's a whole nother thing. We don't have to worry about that. But yeah, the biggest thing I just was gonna say is, like, we should all just kind of definitely do this again. We should just have these conversations, and everyone should definitely connect in individual ways and just find different combinations of what we have to, what we're bringing to the table. Because, Lisa's voice, Leslie's, spirit, everyone's just like kind of like coming in together. And whoever's been listening, I don't know if they're necessarily seeing our faces and stuff, but they're just hearing all these voices, and that's what matters. There's like 7 people that are interested in doing this at the same time. That's amazing, and we don't necessarily all agree. I hope that we have conversations that are difficult, because I think that's kind of the point of this as well. But for the most part, let's all like put our hands together and just make sure that we can like do this together. And that's all I wanted to kind of put out. I just appreciate you guys so much.
Yeah, thanks.
I appreciate you, Tarek.
Thanks for getting this all together, you guys. This has been a really great conversation, and I'm glad to be in the room with everyone here. It's awesome.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's well, you know what? Side note, I appreciate you, Tarek, but
just me.
No, I appreciate everyone in this call, and it's made me start to think, and it's something I put down in my notes on my phone earlier today. It made me start to think, why don't we just do this regularly and have like a roundtable podcast, right? And so that's something some of you may, because that's what I need, another podcast on my plate. But some of you, I will definitely be reaching out to, and I'd love to collaborate on that as just kind of a free, fun project to be able to work on, because that's something I think needs to, definitely needs to happen overall. It's definitely something. Clubhouse is a great app. I agree, Elizabeth. Unfortunately, I do know it's invite only at the moment, and so if you're not via iPhone as well, like Apple, I don't believe you can access it at the moment. But stereo is a great thing too, that Tarek and I have been using for the Identity podcast, and there are some great platforms out there. I think it'd just be cool to continue to do stuff like that. And so thank you everyone for coming onto the show tonight, and I think we can start to wrap it up here, right? You want me to do the thing, Tarek?
I mean, unless anyone else has some last thing that they want to say or
life-altering news.
I mean, I guess we've all kind of been interacting with each other, but I think our biggest audience and just demographic, just to give everyone an update and stuff, it's ranging right now. There are people in Europe that are listening to us right now. Yeah, Caleb can do all the analytics a lot quicker than I can, but their ages ranging all across the globe. Ages are ranging, probably like. What would you say the youngest? Like 15? Probably a little younger than that?
Yeah, 15? So our big demographics at the moment have been anywhere from the ages 22 to 37. 22 to 37, but we do have a decent amount of listening between 17 to 22. But most of our listeners are in the 22 to 27 range, and then from the 27 to about 32. But recently, the 35 to 44 demographic, I study these, has gone up in the past few months. And I think one of the big things is because of this series has allowed it to really grow and has kind of piqued people's interest, right? And we've actually had several people just on our social media accounts message the Identity podcast and say, hey, I've been seeing some of your content posted and all that. And I think it's really neat and interesting, and it's allowed me to develop new tips, new habits, and take these things. And so not only does that make me grateful, but I'd like to thank all of you, because that's because of all of you for that type of stuff happening. So thank you, truly. I think with our demographics, it definitely makes sense with the Identity podcast of having a lot of the younger generation being invested and interested in our show and everything. And I think from there, it also allows us to tell these different demographics and help guide these different demographics with everything that they're trying to do with identity, right? Discovering, understanding, and reflecting. And no matter what generation you're a part of, no matter what age, it's the fact that identity is an all-person thing, right? It's constantly invested in our lives. We are constantly defining ourselves each and every day. And I think that's right now, more than ever, is really important. The pandemic has really taught us to, about identity and the different forms and plethora of identity. And I think it was Cassandra or Tom earlier who kind of mentioned on this sense of the youth and just the different ways with the younger generations of how we can teach them and just how right now we're in a time where the young generation is really starting to take their shape, right? Really important. And we're in a time now where we go back and forth, right? With, oh, it's cool and it's sexy, Earth Day and to be sustainable. And right now, I really like to think that we are in that kind of time. I feel like it is really a hot topic. It's really important. And I think one of the reasons because of that is because of the pandemic. But at the same time, you wonder how long that will last and if it will continue. And I wonder about my generation, our generation, if that will continue as well. Because right now we like to think, yes, our generation is the younger generation is very adamant about this, very, very constant on it. But it makes you wonder if that will maybe fade at some point in time as well.
To be continued. No.
Part two.
Exactly right. We should definitely do another one. But I think Tom mentioned the cyclical idea of this, and I think it's nice. Like you said, it's fresh. I brought up the demographic just to show that we still aren't even directly touching the youth yet, but we are inspiring other people like a little younger than us in our own age group that are willing to kind of reach back and kind of do this. So hopefully, anyone that is continuing to listen, whatever country that you're in, we appreciate you as well. We just want to make sure that you are pushing your best foot forward, and then you have the capability to keep moving forward, the accessibility that Lisa mentioned, to do what you need to do to keep it going. But the main game is consistency at this point. And if we can keep that up, then I think we're doing a huge thing, right? A huge initiative with that. And as far as the bigger corporations are concerned, I think we didn't really touch on this, but just learning how to get funding, learning how to, set up your own corporations and your own, foundations and stuff like that, or starting an entrepreneurship like Cassandra. I think that a lot of this is going to inspire us to do bigger things. I think right now we're definitely at a level where we're all kind of doing something that's similar. But if we keep growing, it's going to eventually grow into this much multi-layered thing. So shout out to everyone. Shout out to the audience. You can do the thing, Caleb. Oh, did you have something to say? Anyone else have anything else to say, or is that it?
I was just going to say, I'll let you do the thing. But I was just going to say I'm happy to be here, and I think we talked about a lot, but to bring it just back to make it kind of simple for people to start is just to think that it's better for a lot of people to be a little bit better than a few people to be perfect. So just making a little change today can create a better tomorrow. So thanks, everyone.
Well said. I like that. I'm going to put that on a t-shirt, a sustainable t-shirt. But thank you. I need to stop talking. Anyway, thank you so much, everyone, for coming on to the show again. And it really is an honor to have you here. And man, this is the largest crowd we've had on the podcast here. And I was a little worried thinking like, oh man, we're going to have to go back and forth. But I think it was a great conversation. We touched on some really important and just incredible things. And I loved continuing to discover all of your identities, as I hope you love to, you enjoyed that as well, but for your side of things. But thank you as always for coming on, and we greatly appreciate it. But you've been listening and watching the Identity Podcast here as we continue and we finish up here our Earth Day special, a big special that we've been planning for a while now. I'm crazy to think that by tomorrow morning I don't have to worry about it anymore. But it's been great. I tell you, of course, you've been listening, watching the Identity Podcast presented to you by Find Your ID NYC. Don't forget to go ahead and follow us on all streaming platforms. You can available on all streaming platforms, and of course, also follow us on all social media platforms. Pretty cool stuff. We're starting to really focus on like Twitch and stuff, or TikTok and all that stuff. So follow us there. But great stuff as always. And of course, if you want to sponsor us, well, you can. All you have to do is email us at press@findyouridnyc.com, and we'll get back to you with more details on that. As always, don't forget to save the planet. Do your part. Let's be smart and be safe out there. Life is still the pandemic is still going on, and things are difficult, but I trust that we are being safe and being smart out there to our best abilities. Of course, this has been the Identity Podcast Earth Day Special featuring Lisa Betty, Leslie Webb, Elizabeth Lindbergh, Cassandra Carmelina, and Tom Duncanson. Of course, your hosts, Tarek and myself, Caleb. We are so grateful to have you here. Don't forget, catch us next week, every Wednesdays at 7:15 p.m. Eastern Time for the Identity Podcast. As we get into May, there's going to be lots of changes, lots of fun, exciting stuff for the Identity Podcast. So stay tuned. Good stuff. Thank you as always. Stay groovy, be good, save the earth. Woo! Thanks as always.
Bye, everyone.